Hi everyone, I'm Susie. It's lovely to meet you, those I haven't met already. I realised before I start, I should probably say something about where my disciplinary background is, because I realised, oh, that's not where I think we're all coming from different places. So actually, Floss and I are both a real mixture of wonderful things as theologians, anthropologists, and philosophers. My research today is actually going to be based on anthropological fieldwork. So that's why I'm telling you stories and things like that. So yeah, I'm going to be telling you about private conversions online during the COVID-19 lockdowns. And yeah, this is based on my fieldwork. So about 6 months ago, I met Faye, who is 19. She sat in front of me, sort of eyes keen and fidgeting, and she told me about her conversion to Christianity over TikTok during the COVID lockdowns. She laughed and told me, literally, my parents thought I'd joined the cult. I mean, who hurt their generation? She told me about the TikToks which explained the Bible to her for the first time, the short length suiting her autism and short attention span. TikTok videos explained to her that Jesus died for our sins. Yeah. Through TikTok, she found a community of young people. She joined online worship groups with 900 other people from across the world, where they would listen to music and a sermon before going into breakout rooms to discuss. Through TikTok, she joined a chat for young Christian women, and they made a Snapchat group where they talk to each other and share. I was so interested in seeing their lives, she told me. She discussed social issues with this group, and she told me she now wanted to find a Christian husband to be able to take children to church and pray together. So for Beatrice, privacy of her bedroom and the long lockdown hours gave her the time and privacy to find Christianity, or even be found by God on TikTok. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. I want to take you on the research journey I'm currently encountering as I undertake my PhD, studying people who became Christian during the pandemic. So where did this fun journey begin? Sorry, Floss, you know this already. So during the summer of 2021, I engaged in largely online fieldwork on the Christian Alpha course. Has anyone heard of Alpha? Okay, yeah. That's why you do it to theologians. Awesome. Okay, so for those who don't, Alpha is an evangelistic Christian course seeking to introduce and unpick the basics of Christianity. It does this through a series of videos, which are then followed by discussions within a small group. There are 16 sessions, though churches can decide how many and which sessions to undertake in their context. That's normally sort of 9 to 12. These sessions include discussions on topics such as, is there more to life than this? Who is Jesus? And why and how do I pray? One of these discussions, which talks about the Holy Spirit, most often takes the form of a weekend away, where the group spend time together and experience the Spirit. It's important to note that this course is for those without a faith as well as those with a faith. It can serve as an introduction to Christianity as well as a spiritual refresher for believers who are struggling with their faith. Alpha was born out of Holy Trinity Brompton in London and can be seen as a product of HTB's explosive growth, which began in the late 1970s. So today, Alpha is a charitable company and has an annual income of over 12.5 million. Since its conception, it's grown massively and it's been undertaken by over 30 million people in over 100 countries and in more than 100 languages. Recently, it's opened up its use to multiple denominations, and now it's run not only by charismatic evangelical churches, but also by Anglican, Presbyterian, Lutheran, Baptist, Methodist, Pentecostal, Eastern Orthodox, and controversially by the Catholics, which I'm allowed to say as a Catholic. So, my interest in Alpha was piqued when I read a news report that Alpha's attendance had tripled during the COVID lockdowns. So historically, Alpha had always been in person, so getting to know each other over a meal before discussing God and the meaning of life. Alpha had insisted on not going online until the pandemic, when they're forced to hold sessions over Zoom. And when they did this, their attendance exploded and they haven't looked back. So they still do some online and some in person. So I began my research sort of fascinated in doing Christian unbelievers and non-believers engagement in suffering. I am a Christian, oh, I've already said this, as well as a trained philosopher and anthropologist. Now you know it doubly so. So Suffering and God presented a tension between my theology training that told me that the problem of evil was the main reason people did not believe, and my anthropology training, which told me that suffering led people in need of comfort to God. Oh, do you want to deal with
Sorry, it's not, the slides aren't changing online, so I just,
yeah, you fiddle about, you do whatever you like, they're not that important. So yeah, there's a tension between these two ideas from my discipline, and it seemed the pandemic offered the perfect moment of encounter to test them.
this one will find.
Did Alpha's growth confirm that people sought out religion in times of trouble? The short answer from my fieldwork, yeah, we can do that now. We good?
It's working now.
Awesome. So the short answer from my fieldwork was no. Interesting. Throughout my interviews, experience of suffering was not cited as a reason why people had done Alpha. Prima facie, one might think this is caused by the awkwardness of talking about suffering. However, I readily spoke to people about their trials, often made easier by my openness to discuss the illness and death of my own mum to leukemia in 2018. But their reasons for coming to Alpha were different. It seemed for the majority of people I spoke to that they'd been interested in religion or exploring their faith before the pandemic. Throughout my research, I term these people believe curious people. So by believe curious, I am alluding to the language of identity politics to describe those people who are interested in religion or spirituality, but have not yet made up their mind. So the pandemic brought the believe curious out of the woodwork. First of all, this was because online Alpha was more practical. There we go. Oh no, never mind, it's fine. Than in-person Alpha. It took less time, people had more time. It was open to those who could not travel or had care responsibilities. Furthermore, people were no longer bound to engage in Alpha at their local church. They could shop around, even attend an Alpha session in another country. For example, I spoke to a woman who attended a session in Lancaster from Germany. My brother attended one from Buenos Aires in London. So on top of all this, each Alpha itself was no longer bound to marketing only to a sort of 10-mile radius around its physical location. Now people could invite friends to Alpha wherever they were based. Beyond this unsexy but realistic answer, there was another reason why people attended Alpha online. The online environment allowed the belief curious to explore faith in private, away from the social gaze, with a socially acceptable exit. Those who had previously been afraid of being known or seen to attend a religious or Christian evangelistic group did so privately from their own homes. No one would know. Further, if it was clearly not for them, they knew they could click the exit button, write a short email to the organizer saying the internet wasn't up to these sessions, and wipe their hands of all this God stuff. Scratch that itch with no social consequences. As those online on Zoom today can do the same with my talk if it's dreadfully boring by this point, so that's fine. So during my research, I saw a resonance between my work and that of Ayala Feder with the ultra-Orthodox Jews in Brooklyn, who use the internet to explore socially unacceptable doubts they have about their faith. The privacy of the online allows them to work out what they think, how they feel, and by finding others in the same situation, feel less crazy. From my fieldwork, it seemed that online Alpha provided the invert of Feder's research. Here, the belief curious within a still secularizing society felt able to explore faith online without embarrassment or social anxiety. So the pandemic brought the belief curious out of the woodwork through Alpha. Is this the end of the story of Christian conversion online during the pandemic? Were all those who converted already belief curious before? This question brings us back to B and TikTok. B was not interested in Christianity before the pandemic. B became belief curious through TikTok. So who's heard of TikTok? Everyone should have had a TikTok at this conference. Yay. Okay. For those allergic to social media like myself, I must confess I hated the fact I had to hold my hand up for TikTok during Floss's questions. Here's a brief description. So TikTok was founded in 2016 as a collaboration of the Chinese Douyin and Musical.ly by the company ByteDance. It hosts user-submitted vertical videos, which can be 15 seconds, 30 seconds, or 2 minutes long. It has currently been downloaded by about 2 billion people, so roughly a quarter of the world's population. The average TikTok user spends 95 minutes a day on the app, so that's equivalent to about 578 hours a year. I'm not going to unpack the whole of TikTok and its current sort of geopolitical significance for you, but an important thing about TikTok I need you to know is that unlike other platforms like Facebook or Instagram, the main and majority of the content the consumer sees on TikTok is from sources they are not following, but TikTok thinks they would like to view. So you might ask, interesting, didn't think it would go there. What does it mean for TikTok to think? This would be a good question. The content on TikTok shown to consumers is determined by the TikTok algorithm, the mystical spirit-like algorithm, which has freaked out users of the platform for knowing exactly what they want and need to watch. TikTok is so addictive because of this algorithm. So how does it work? So when someone engages with TikTok, the algorithm will show them a wide range of content and track how they respond to it. Someone can swipe off a TikTok video in half a second, and it will track that it does this and whether they keep watching. So during my fieldwork, I spoke to a Christian content creator, Henry, and he told me that for TikToks, you ask, are they hooked in the first half second? You need to make sure they're hooked. How are you going to make them watch the whole video? If a random TikTok user watches Henry's Christian content for longer than half a second, the algorithm will record this response and send them more Christian content. This content comes to these people seemingly from nowhere. Further, the majority of videos sent to a consumer will relate to things they have previously shown interest in. TikTok will also sort of scatter in a few completely different things to see if the consumer is interested in this content. These two aspects make TikTok so addictive. You're constantly showing material you are interested in, but also TikTok farms new interests in your engagement with the app by showing you new content you might find interesting. It is made this way because the TikTok creators want it to be addictive. The more viewing hours, the more ad time, the more money for TikTok. So what does this all mean for evangelism and conversions, you may ask? What this means is that in the 578 hours a year you spend on TikTok, it is incredibly likely that at some point you'll be shown religious content. I partly know this is true because of how many screenshots I've been sent by my atheist friends since I started this research a year ago. The other day, one sent me a post from Extreme Mormons, which is an account posting videos of young Mormon elders attempting parkour and bike stunts and answering questions about God. It's actually quite cool, cool guy. Anyway, so my current research explores how the sort of absence of agency creates divine presence in the context of TikTok. B, receive Christian TikToks from God. For my Alpha interlocutors, they sought out God through Alpha, which was enabled by the pandemic. For B and those finding God on TikTok, however, he seeks them out. And once they're interested and the algorithm recognizes this, God is in touch daily. Throughout this research, I compare TikTok leavers to Luhrmann's ethnography of how God becomes real for her evangelical Christian interlocutors. Luhrmann's interlocutors make God real through practice, learning, and play over long periods of time. Her interlocutors work to make God real, while for they and those engaging on TikTok, God comes to them, teaching them through educational TikToks or extreme moments, leading them into the subculture of Christian TikTok, where they find community, and he does so playfully, because TikToks are innately playful. The distance between B, the content creator, the algorithm, and the Christian community on TikTok, where she engages through her laptop screen during the isolation pandemic, paradoxically creates intimacy. Like my Alpha interlocutors, she engages from a private, safe, and intimate space. From here, Christianity meets her where she is. God meets her where she is. The more time she spends on TikTok, the more tailored her TikToks, the more intimate the relationship becomes. This research is very much still ongoing. I am nowhere near my destination, and although WHO declared that the COVID global health emergency was officially over about 4 weeks ago, the impacts of the pandemic on religious engagement and conversions is definitely not over. But evidently, the privacy, space, and the time facilitated by the pandemic has created a unique epistemic situation which has facilitated conversion either sought out, like by my alpha interlocutors, or not sought out, like by they. The pandemic created a state of epistemic vulnerability, or maybe epistemic plasticity, which will have brought people to faith, but also will have led people away from faith. TikTok is not just the home of Christian TikTok or non-talk, but also the ex-evangelicals and atheist TikTok. The lockdowns were liminal spaces of rupture and rapture. Only now, as we leave these boundary moments in the past, can we walk the fields of our friends and interlocutors and see the fruits and debris of these moments. Thank you. Oh, also, this is the network I run, if you want to join it. It's always online, so anyone can come, and Triffitt is involved too. Ooh. Anyone? Hello, what do you?
It's great. It's different to the previous one I've seen. It's great. It's so interesting. Thank you, Susie. I just wanted to know how your current research, or if your current research or PhD, if this is your MPhil, right, relates to digital media, or is it a little bit different?
So actually all my research on TikTok is within my PhD project. So of course, rightly pointed out, my alpha research is my master's project, and I'm developing it through now. So I'm actually being incredibly intrepid and moving to Yorkshire in 3 weeks to start my real field work, you know, crazy. So it is going to be developed because I'm looking at how going online has enabled churches to evangelize in a different way, and how Christians themselves have been using these apps to develop or lose their faith during that time. So TikTok has just been a sort of side hustle, but it's very much within my PhD project.
And so the church you're moving to, have they got a strong presence online?
Yeah, so the church I moved to was set up about 2 months before the pandemic started. So their entire history has been defined by the pandemic. They're also a wrestling church. We can discuss that at another point. Hey.
Thanks for your talk. It was super interesting. Do you think, I guess, like I was thinking about like the previous slide, you have people having fun, kind of, yeah. And I wonder if privacy kind of on the side of the content creator, or like being able to air your private thoughts, maybe also like with the Heretics book, I forget what the actual title of it is. Do you think, yeah, privacy on the end of the content creator also helps them reach or create content that can reach people who need that privacy in that space to kind of explore without the social pressure of like being in like an actual space and around actual people to connect to God?
Yeah, so I think you sort of hit the nail on the head a little bit of what I think that's why Alpha was successful. I file on the papers on how actually for people who just might naturally be a bit more introverted, as well as other people not wanting to see them go to church. You know, there was a woman who was converting from another faith, and she hadn't felt comfortable going to church, and so she felt she could do it online, and Alpha says private space. I think another whole paper I almost want to write at some point is on how these autism made this a space for her. I've spoken to her recently, and she's like, ChatGPT is my new best friend, and I'm like, yeah, I don't want to write my whole life's work on this poor woman, but I definitely think it does facilitate different kinds of people, and particularly those who might be more nervous in a group setting. And I think there's a lot of good in that. I think there can be bad in that as well, because I sometimes worry about her because there aren't these other figures making sure it's not getting too black and white too quickly. And I think the thing is with TikTok, the content which you get pushed on TikTok is the more successful content. And often that can be the sort of bolder, crazier content. So you have this fear that some of these really extreme views will get forced on people who are isolated. And that definitely happens on TikTok. Do you want to start? Have some coffee? Oh.
Yeah, so thank you. I was just wondering whether there was an issue about all of this stuff happening online, and thus, you know, the potential converts being divorced from the concrete and the concretely communal aspects of what traditional religious practices do. Previous what you like.
Yeah, so really good question. I think in my experience with my interlocutors, I think honestly, the majority of them will become Christians online and then find a church.
Yeah.
So B is part of the church now. And so that is good because she has to support that network. And I think within the context, particularly of Alpha, those Alpha sessions were run by separate churches. I think where it gets interesting is TikTok. You know, the most successful Christian TikToker is a 17-year-old. So actually, Christian TikTok's almost more successful for these influencers who really know what they're doing because they're of that generation, and they are sometimes divorced from the setting and often from a theological education as well. Not that that means you know all the answers, you definitely don't. And I think that's a whole interesting thing of where are people going to be getting their theological understandings from and how divorces that from certain settings. But there's also good from it because it means that you are being exposed to lots of different ideas instead of one. Okay, I'll be quiet now. Thank you so much, everyone. There's sorry, did that one here.
Sorry, I actually put up my.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brandon. I wonder if there is more skeptical way to read this. More people want forms of religion that are convenient and individualistic and appeal to the religion offers them. So I see this from religion. The question is whether expression can. Brandon, I think 100%. I do think. I think this is one of the reasons it works, but I think, as you say, it doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing. I think this is going to sound very, very cynical, but I think for lots of modern religions, for them to survive in the world we're in, they have to make sense to the generation that they're trying to seek and convert. And I think this is one way that churches are doing that. Yes, they are adapting to our modern culture, but there can be good in that. So yeah, I think you are right. It can become very consumeristic, and churches and Christian influencers can be competing against one another. But that does also mean a sort of, oh God, this is going to make me come off as a proper capitalist, but it means that you create incredibly good Christian influencers who have massive creative teams behind them making this incredible content. So from a evangelizing more people standpoint, it hopefully will cause that, because we're actually creating better evangelizing content, because it has to be good, otherwise it will fail and the algorithm will dump it. Is that an answer?
Perhaps what I'm worried about is that the algorithm doesn't really pick out Christian content that's good in the Christian sense, but in the sense that's marketable. In which case, by conforming the messages to these, I mean, this is just hypothetical, I guess, but in conforming, I mean, I'm sure there's a way to do contextualization that doesn't fall into these problems. But then I think the worry is by conforming one to the algorithm, but the algorithm doesn't pick out content based on how good it is from any ethical perspective, but from a
you are right. One
yeah.
thing which I didn't really have time to talk about here, and you'll know more about because you know way more about technology than I do, is the subcultures on TikTok. So what actually happens is that the algorithm will actually often force these people into Christian subcultures, where they do form a community with other Christians who will regulate things a bit more. And also teach them discernment. So another conversation I've had with B is about having discernment on TikTok. It's going, has God sent me all of these TikToks, or did he send me some of them? So developing almost like the theology discernment that we have about bibliomancy or something. So I talk about bibliomancy in the context of TikTok. Okay, so God sent me this TikTok today. Was that actually from God? All these ideas. So that there is a whole developing theology of discernment in the context of digital media as well. But yeah, I am hopelessly optimistic, and it's awful. But there are lots of bad things as well. Thanks, Brendan. Cool. Okay.